enter here. All right. Thank you everyone for joining. Good morning, good afternoon, and everywhere. We are so happy to have all of us in this session. And we want to take this opportunity to welcome each and every one of us in this 2-hour forum. So privileged to have all of you. We ask you, if you are able to, please, against your name, if you could write where you are coming from, we'll really appreciate, for the purpose of recording, the person who is recording this program. So we want to say thank you for joining. We'll go straight to our prayer, and I'll ask Avis to go ahead and we can pray together. If please try to put your mic on mute. Thank you. Avish.
Thank you, Hannah. All right, there will be a short prayer via a video, a small video with a prayer. So let's watch the video as we pray with our eyes open. Can you confirm if you're able to see the screen, all of you?
Yeah.
Just went off.
It's gone off.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay. And if the audio
No?
is okay, do let me know as well. Is the audio working?
There's
No.
no.
Okay, so when I share the screen, there should be optimize. Okay, it should work now.
The heavens are. O Lord, our God, we thank you for the earth, for as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are your thoughts higher than our thoughts. We thank you for the earth, for the grasslands, the blue sky and white clouds. But the colors, O Lord, of the wind are changing. The green grasslands are brown with desert. The blue sky is yellow with sandstorms. The air is polluted, O Lord. The water is contaminated and our fishes die. The land is toxic as chemical waste flow. The climate is changing, O Lord, and so must we. So we repent, O Lord, before you, the creator of heaven and earth. You have given us the beautiful earth with all the wonderful creatures and precious living things to live with and to enjoy. Yet, in our greedy, selfish ways, we have dominated and exploited your creation. We have used, overused, and abused the earth's resources. We have degraded and destroyed habitats and damaged ecosystems. We repent, O Lord, before you, our Father God, who in love has redeemed your creation and has promised us a new creation where the heavens and the earth will become as one. Give us fresh eyes to see and fresh touch to restore the earth's degraded land, rivers and seas. Teach us to tread gently, to speak softly, and to live simply with greater love and care, so that all may begin to see a new vision of hope. Hope that the grey sky can become blue. Grant us a vision of living hope where we live more, love more. Empower us to care in this climate crisis and lift up your creation as we join in all creation to worship you, our Creator God. Amen. Amen. To worship, lift up your creation as we join in all creation.
Amen for that, and thank you for participating in that prayer. Let me just quickly start the screen sharing to the next slide. All right, so can somebody thumbs up if you're able to see the screen? Or if you're able to hear me as well?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, excellent, thank you. So just to set a context, and we are really happy from the Resilience Technical Learning Lab, and with the blessings from ADRA Afro, with the leadership of Hana Zivai and the rest of the team there, and also in consultation with ADRA International. And thank you for Sonia's and Michael's leadership in guiding us through this webinar. So just to set a context, it'll be a twofold approach in this presentation. And I believe each one of us have looked through the agenda, and we will try as much as follow that agenda closely with the timings. And I would like to let you know that this is going to be like a teaser or a teaser to a movie or a trailer to a movie. And we are also planning for a series of detailed webinar on interested topics in the months to come. But however, to start up with, we're really glad to kickstart with a shorter version and trying to encapsulate all that we could within the agenda. So in this short presentation, there will be a twofold which will include a brief context and landscape of climate change, and followed by a very quick update from ADRA's participation in COP27. So to start with, the energy trapped by man-made global warming pollution is now equivalent to exploding 600,000 Hiroshima-class atomic bombs per day, 365 days per year. Let me repeat that again. The global warming pollution is now equivalent to exploding 600,000 Hiroshima-class atomic bombs per day, 365 days per year. And this is from James Hansen, former director of NASA Goddard Institute for Space Studies. Now, extreme weather disasters cost the global economy $2.5 trillion in the last decade. That's an increase of almost 1 trillion over the previous 10 years. Some might be wondering, what is the cost of carbon? The cost of carbon includes political instability, floods and mudslides, wildfires, droughts, storm damage, ocean acidification, infrastructure loss, climate refugees, species extinction, melting glaciers, famine, water scarcity, ecosystem loss, affecting our way of living, infectious disease, and sea level rise, and more. By International Energy Agency, IEA, net zero by 2050, they say all the technologies needed to achieve the necessary deep cuts in global emission by 2030 already exists. And the policies that can drive their deployment are already proven. So here is a brief update from ADRA's COP27 engagement. And we will be introducing you a sort of a ADRA ambassador for climate in the form of artificial intelligence. It's not a real person, but we have tried to put in all the content, and we'll watch this short video. Please let me know if you're able to hear the video clearly. I mean, if the sound works.
Hello, EDRA colleagues. I am happy to share.
Were you able to hear?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Oops.
Hello, EDRA colleagues. I am happy to share with you the key takeaway from COP27 Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. EDRA Canada and EDRA Germany participated actively under their respective pavilions and side events on tackling climate change. On climate adaptation, the Conference of Parties noted with serious concern the existing gap between current levels of adaptation and the levels needed to respond to the adverse effect of climate change. Loss and damage agenda was noted with grave concern the growing gravity, scope and frequency in all regions of loss and damage associated with the adverse effects of climate change. On the early warning and systematic observation, the emphasis was on the need to address existing gaps in the global climate observing system, particularly in developing countries. Pathways to Just Transition affirmed that sustainable and just solutions to the climate crisis must be founded on meaningful and effective social dialogue and participation of all stakeholders. Regarding finance, serious concern was raised, the developed countries to mobilize jointly $100 billion per year by 2020. This target is yet to be achieved. Conference of Parties acknowledged enhancing implementation action by non-party stakeholders. Recognizes the important role of indigenous peoples, local communities, women, including youth and children. I hope this information helps us take meaningful environmental and climate action in Africa. Hello, EDRA colleagues.
All right. Thank you for listening to that small presentation from COP27 on what ADRA Germany and ADRA Canada sort of did on the ground. Now I will like to hand over this time to Sonia to take us through a topic on the technical learning labs, a little bit of past, present, and what the future holds. Thank you, Sonia.
Sure. Hi, everybody. It's nice to see your Zoom boxes. Can you hear me okay, Avish?
Yes, yes.
All right, cool. So yeah, just a little bit of brief history. And I know that some of you are quite familiar with all of this. And perhaps some of you are not, and maybe this is a good entryway to join some of our RTLLs, but just a little history. So the technical learning labs were created as technical working groups in Mexico during an AAC session 7 years ago in 2015. And really the point of creating these groups was a recognition that we're doing a lot of work all around the network, but we weren't talking to one another. And for some technical folks, it's lonely when you're the only nutrition person or wash person in your office, but it's not really lonely if you think about the sort of scope of how many technical people are around the network. And so really the purpose was to bring people together who were doing similar work, but weren't necessarily learning from each other. We weren't taking, lessons learned from one part of the world and shifting it to match perhaps good work that could be done in another part of the world. And I'll give you an example, livelihoods and a lot of agriculture work. We found that with our multi-sectoral programs, the same sort of interventions that we were doing in Bolivia, we were also doing in Mozambique. But no one from Bolivia or Mozambique had talked to each other when they were designing them, right? So there was a lot there to build on. We also weren't really known as ADRA at country level or global level for technical rigor, for sort of any very specific things. So when we created these learning labs, now they're called learning labs, it was really also so we could increase the visibility and really show people by documentation what we're actually good at. And so initially we created health, nutrition, and WASH as 3 separate groups. There was education, there was agriculture and livelihoods, and monitoring, evaluation, and learning. Since that time of 2015, when this all started, we have shape-shifted a bit. We merged health, nutrition, and WASH, so they are one technical learning lab. We have added additional groups like gender, cash and voucher programming. We were very fortunate because there were resilience hubs that existed before the TLLs were created, and we were able to build a global resilience technical learning lab, enter this room, and essentially feed in information that was happening with the regional hubs into this global hub. So much has happened since 2015, everybody. And when we look at all the webinars that have been produced through the technical learning labs, white papers, research papers, conference attendances, lots and lots and lots of presentations, meetings with donors. In 2019, Dr. Zivai led a meeting with FAO in Africa, in Kenya, to talk about the farmer market school approach. And so that is exactly why these groups were created, so that tremendous work like that could take place. This past June, a small group met to really start to reshape and reflect and rethink, about these technical learning labs, how we started, why we started, where we've come, and now where we're going. There's much to sort out in terms of where we're going and the future of these groups. But this right here today, everyone connecting, what the resilience group is doing, leading this conversation, is exactly why these groups were created. So thank you for the opportunity to sort of advocate for the TLLs a bit, Abish. And I'll wrap up with that. Happy to answer any questions if anyone has any. Thank you. One last thing, every group, for those who aren't aware, has a chair and a co-chair. I see on this call have already at least a couple of chairs with us, and probably some co-chairs too. I can't see everybody, but thank you. Thank you, Abish. Over.
Thank you very much, Sonia. And we really recognize all the hard work which goes behind the scenes to make this structure work, and a large portion of strategic guidance from your team and yourself is much appreciated, and the future looks very promising. And I think I truly believe that RTLL plays a role of what a heart would for a human being. It thrives, it gives the energy and the life for the programming. I'm not too sure if is Anna with us now? Newman? Clovis, is she joined?
She's joining, but we are having an event at other Germany at the same time, and she's probably just finalizing because the event is in the final moments there.
Okay, so in that case, we will move to the next one. Clovis, if you can take it up from here on the best practice for a carbon neutral Africa. And very soon, Michael will be joining us as well. Thank you.
Can you all see my screen here? 1 second. Can everyone see the screen that I'm sharing?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Sorry, I thought I heard something. I'm going to talk about their carbon accounting and the steps that we can do it to measure our footprint. Basically, this tool can be spread and used by any office or project. The tool is called the Humanitarian Carbon Calculator. This tool was developed by RCRC and 25+ NGOs we at ADRA, we are part of the group, and we have developed by analyzing the tool and find out where things we could improve. The good thing about this tool that it brings is standardization, because basically many office projects were measuring the footprint using different methodologies. Now we are using one methodology only, which is for the greenhouse gas protocol. We focus on the big hits, meaning that by measuring, we can see where we have the biggest concentration of carbon emissions, and by that we can tackle these areas. And for some big NGOs who are in the project, like MSF and Red Cross, they have noticed that 70% of the footprint is coming from suppliers and from the goods and services they have hired, right? And it has recently been adopted by DG EC offices. They have started they are testing the tool for the past month. Not entirely sure how that's going to reflect in projects. At the moment, they're just using that for the office context. Here we can see clear link between a green response and a business as usual. With a green response, you can have a much more healthy environment. We are trying to increase the climate and disaster release, and you see the potential of a much bigger green response here. There's also a growing interest in green business versus gray business. Gray meaning business as usual. In the current proposals and grants that I have seen and we have discussed in other meetings, the topic of green humanitarian action is coming up more and more often, meaning that more projects are requiring that we have a foreseen analysis of the carbon footprint that we plan to measure, or after the project, or while the project's happening. This is being required more and more. And we're going to be talking about the tools that we are developing and we are working on it. That's also reflected in the other network documents, as the carbon reduction guide, the resilience policy, and the environment and climate change policy. It also talks about us being the stewardship of God's creation. We need to take care of the planet and everyone living, and by that decrease the impact of our actions. That means that goes to that we need to implement action on the ground and assess our footprint. That's an exercise that we all can take part of. Here are some steps that we are using to measure footprint. We have developed an internal system for that collection. Here in the call, we have David Mazin from Mozambique. We have used to measure the first year of a project Mozambique, but we used a different system. Now we have developed a system that I think it's more visually, it has improved visually, and we have put together many different examples. Now we have 2 office examples and 2 country projects example. We have one in humanitarian, one in development. There will be video trainings covering all aspects of the tool, practical lessons, how to break down expenses, and there'll be a lot of tips and examples that you can use. All this material will be available at the end of January 2003. The reason for that is because the launch of the tool, the humanitarian carbon calculator, it's been done by RCRC, and they have scheduled for the launch for January 17th at the moment. But so far it has been delayed twice, so that's why I put end of 2023. And all other offices and anyone interested will be able to have access to the tool and have access to the video trainings on how to calculate their own footprint, to take tips and use the examples, and basically work together. And I'll be available to discuss, and you can always reach out to me if you have any doubts and if you wanna know more about it. But the use of the tool for everyone will be available at the end of January. But the internal system for that collection is already ready for use. The video training is not fully ready, but all the text is done, the slides are done. We are working on it. Parts of the tool. The tool it's gonna cover all types of emissions, 1, 2, and 3. The minimum required is scope 1 and 2, meaning that all the energy that it's produced in the office, the energy that's produced in the office location, and also the energy purchase. That's the minimum required to participate and to start measuring your footprint. It's very desirable and be very happy if everyone joins with emissions 3, meaning suppliers and goods and services that we buy. And the key learning points here are going to be, you're going to learn how to set up your office project emissions, define boundaries for the inventory. I'm talking about scope 1, 2, or scope 3, where to locate your greenhouse gas emission data, and how to calculate. Those are the topics we're going to be covering on the video trainings and also in the internal system for data collection. And there's also a very interesting possibility for integration between offices. Here at example of a dashboard that we have put together the 4 places we are collecting now. We are collecting Canada, the office in Canada, the office in Germany, a project in Mozambique, and a project in India. I haven't even shared that with David Mazind, who's here in the meeting yet, because we are still doing that on the test phases. The goal here is to bring together all the emissions of the participating offices. And by that, we can see how many trees we would need to plant in order to offset, how much that would cost in carbon credits, and many other equivalents. Is if you can see here, that if we put all the emissions together of these 4 projects, you'd need to, that would be the same as driving 856,000 kilometers on an average diesel-powered car. And with that, it's visually much easier to know where emissions are, and brings us a lot of solution for our reduction and offset. But just remember that the reduction, the offset is the last step. First, we need to start measuring to focus on the reduction. That's the most important part. And then we can focus on started offsetting that. But that's basically the integration that we are aiming for here, is to have a global dashboard where we can see all the emissions. And that's at the moment that's been done by me, the emissions, because I'm getting the emissions from the offices and putting it all together. And for the presentation, I would like to leave a few moments for Q&A moments, and I can also go back to any slides that you think I haven't presented well or you need more information. Thank you very much for your attention. Let me just stop sharing the screen here a minute. Second here. Okay. I believe I'm not sharing the screen anymore. Am I?
We can still see your screen, Clovis.
Oh, okay, okay. 1 second. I paused the sharing of the screen. 1 second here. Wait 1 second. Stop sharing. Okay.
Thank you very much, Clovis. I may have missed out to give a small intro for Clovis.
Yes, sorry for that, everyone.
Clovis Guerrero is a technical coordinator for carbon accounting and environmental protection, jointly funded by ADRA Germany and ADRA Canada. So he's a great asset for the whole ADRA network, as you can see. All right, so next we will have Michael Peach, who is the Senior Coordinator for Network Emergency for ADRA International, and he will take us through ADRA's Climate Action Plan. Thank you, Michael. There was a little bit of glitch. Thanks, we got it sorted out.
Greetings. Let me just share my screen. All right. Click on that. Perfect. So look, I just want to thank you all, first of all, for joining. Thank you so much for taking the time this close to Christmas to show some interest in this really important topic. We have been working on this particularly since COP26 last year, the COP27 this year, There's been a small group that have been progressing this, and I want to thank those individuals too, and for the RTLL for actually driving this event today. So thank you for everybody who's taken the time to put this together, and those who are joining. My presentation is going to be quite brief. I really just want to point us all in sort of a common direction. There are a lot of ways we can move in the climate adaptation, the climate mitigation space, whether we're talking about environmental stewardship, climate action, regeneration, nature-based solutions. Like, there's a lot of terminology, but particularly over the last year and a half, we've been increasingly trying to develop a common compass point for ADRA to move in the one direction. And a lot of it stems from the Climate Charter. The Climate Charter may be new to some of you. It is a global document. ADRA did not create the Climate Charter. ADRA, 4 of the country offices in our network, are now signatories to this Climate Charter. It was established by the Red Cross and the Federation, also ICFA, Interaction, the United Nations Interagency Standing Committee. It contains 6 commitments. There's a link down the bottom of the screen there if you'd like to go and look at it. It's a very basic document, but it's very clever because those 6 commitments give us a common measuring platform for all participating NGOs and governments. There are now, I think, 300 NGOs that have become signatories to the Climate Charter. And the 6 commitments are very clever because they incorporate a lot of the other documents and the frameworks that have been in existence for the last few years to try and come up with a standard that we can all use to start moving forward. You'll see, you'll be all very familiar with those standards and those frameworks that are listed on the page there. What we did is we took the Climate Charter as a starting point and said, what can we do to apply it to ADRA context? And you'll see here the climate action framework that we have drafted, and we've given it 3 distinct columns. There's a leadership focus, there's a programming focus, and an advocacy focus. So whether you are in a humanitarian space or whether you're in a development space, whether you're an administrator in an ADRA office, or whether you have more of an advocacy role, we've tried to put those 6 commitments. You can see there that section there with the 6 commitments under those 3 columns. In terms of objectives for ADRA over the next 5-10 years, we do want to, as Clovis was saying there, measure our own carbon footprint and find ways to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. Ultimately, how can we green our operations, whether it's in development, whether it's in a humanitarian response, or whether it's just in terms of our country office and our field offices and our daily business. What can we do to start greening those operations? Clovis has mentioned there also about the carbon calculator that we're looking forward to in January. And we'll also hear today in terms of our carbon reduction guide and our new environmental policy. Under programming, whether it's nature-based solutions in development, in disaster risk reduction activities, in our humanitarian response activities, we want to start to apply those commitments across the board in all of our programming. And finally, from an advocacy perspective, during COVID, ADRA grew its beneficiaries significantly. And in 2021, 34 million beneficiaries assisted around the ADRA network in our 120 plus countries. So how do we advocate for those people that we serve on an annual basis, particularly in a changing climate, people who are being impacted, the most vulnerable, and you can start to see there how we can do that. Now, there's a lot of work that still needs to happen, but we wanted to have a common framework that all country officers could apply to, that wasn't different to the Climate Charter globally, that starts to see us measuring the same activities and moving in sort of a common direction. This is not a compliance activity. It's not linked to ADRA's accreditation and licensing. It's an opt-in system, and we'll be encouraging officers to move in this direction. Feel free to sit at the edges and observe, But as time goes on, if there's an opportunity for you to be involved, we would love that. And if you're asking the question, what does that mean for me? I need more information. What guidance is there available for me as a country office or as a programming person to start applying these 3 columns or those 6 commitments? I'd like to point to the compendium that came out a few months ago. This document by ICFA, 122 pages in length, but it's a fantastic resource for the ADRA network to start thinking about whatever activities you're involved in, whether it's conflict, food security, WASH, any terms of early warning or anticipatory action, inclusion, protection. We can look at the very various lenses that we operate under to try and start to apply those 6 commitments under the Climate Charter and ADRA's framework. So there's a link to at the bottom of the screen there. I'll share this document with you, but I just wanted to sort of give this short presentation to say this is ADRA's North Star. This is the compass direction for the ADRA network. We have presented this to NetCom, which is the senior committee for the ADRA network recently. We will be looking at including aspects of this in the next 5-year network strategic framework for ADRA globally next year. And we hope that this will be something that will be with us for the next 5-10 years as we start to move our network in a common direction towards achieving those 6 commitments under leadership, programming and advocacy. So I just want to leave that with you. It's really just a teaser for where we're heading. You'll see more of this as we move forward, and thank you for the opportunity to just paint that picture and sort of be that point of reference for the network for the next coming years. Thank you. Any questions, or are we moving on?
Yes, we're moving on. Given that this is a trailer to the upcoming full-on movie.
Good.
So thank you so much, Michael, for setting the stage, and definitely climate action in Africa, taken up by the ADRA, AFRO, and the country offices, will savor and digest this strategy and see what fits them. And then definitely, I believe under the leadership of Zivai and team, there would be lasting changes and lasting climate action in Africa. So at this time, I would like to invite Kelvin to take us through best practice of resilience programming for resilient African communities. Kelvin is the RTLL co-chair and also currently working with ADRA South Sudan. Thank you, Kelvin.
Thank you so much, Harish. Let me try see if I can have. Is my slide visible?
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And thank you once again for all members who made time to join us today. So I'm going to give a brief presentation. As Rich has mentioned, this is just basically a trailer to a movie. And for my guest, then I'm going to introduce best practices for Africa resilience programming. So moving forward is that there has been quite, increased incidents and severity of shocks and stresses in Africa. And based on the Crete International Disaster Database, we're able to see the past 20 years, some of the intense or rather some of the biggest shocks we've had based on kind of a regional block where we see drought, extreme temperatures to the northern part of Africa, floods between the central and some part of southern Africa, as well as drought. as we've seen of late for the Horn of Africa, or rather the effect it's had. So this is just a representation, and below we can see that we've had over 1,000 events, which has led to quite a number of death tolls, as well as millions who have been affected. And for that reason, the climate-induced disasters have not only been the case for Africa. Trends also show that there's been increase in the non-state conflicts, and particularly for the African context, we've had quite a number of communal conflicts. And interesting to note is that Africa actually is a world leading in terms of this type of conflicts, which of course, being that ADRA works with the community, then poses quite a big challenge for our intervention. And so the case for humanitarian crisis has really been on the high end. And on average, around 40 billion USD goes to Africa every year in terms of development. And while all this is taking place, it has been notable that progress is stalling. So much is invested in Africa in terms of assistance, and while it's expected that then communities are going to get back on their feet, it's not the case. And so the whole idea of resilience was born. And so while so many definitions are out there, I just had to put this very simple and straightforward definition that resilience being the ability of a system, and in this case being a community or a household exposed to hazards such as ones we've seen in the first slide, to resist, absorb, adapt to, and recover from the effects. And as we can see from the image on your screens, is that there's two comparisons of a less resilient and a more resilient kind of community, where less resilient scenarios, or rather business as usual, is the case where there's always permanent loss, or rather recovery takes time. That's because in most instances, communities or households usually have fallen below the tipping point. And so this is the opposite for more resilient communities, where despite hazards, or acute hazards rather for that matter, they usually are not really affected to the level that they drop down below the tipping point, and as such recovery is always quite fast. So just in simple terms, resilience is all about bouncing back. And for this reason then, why is it then that resilience is important? So we see that of late, it has been that there has been increased frequency and more so interconnectedness of different type of risks, from the changing climate, the conflicts that we've seen. We have water crisis, we have an aging population, as well as rising income and wealth disparity, not to mention the high levels of inflation. So there has been quite a lot of interconnectedness in the risks that we are facing, and particularly in Africa. And therefore, this brings into the whole reason as to why we need to look at resilience. Additionally, we are in a new era of humanitarian aid and development funding, where there has been an increased importance of resilience from a donor. An example on your screen being the ECHO, who recently in its strategy, came up with a list of requirement, or rather resilience markers that organizations seeking to bid for funding should actually meet. And as such, we take note of one of the markers being whether the proposal includes adequate analysis of shocks, stresses, and vulnerabilities, whether the project is risk-informed. That is, does the project include adequate measures to ensure it does not aggravate risk or undermine capacities? Does the project include measures to build local capacities? And does the project take opportunities to support long-term strategies in reducing humanitarian needs? Obviously, then it would mean that if you're responding to a call by ECHO and your proposal does not meet such requirements, then you will have less chances of getting the funding. So the world is moving towards a new era of funding where resilience is actually key. And so now that we are aware of these requirements of prerequisites, so what are the good ideas? Rather, how then are we able to move from the good ideas and the good projects we have to more good practices? And here I'm going to give examples from just a recent conducted study with the support of ADRA Africa, and to mention also the support of Dr. Zivai. And so these are just some of the good practices that we ought to have for our resilience programming. So one of them is we need to ensure that we promote resilience needs assessment for our project's entry. And this, I would refer to resilience capital analysis as well as capacity analysis. Just to mention again is that there is a ADRA resilience capital assessment tool under development. And this, of course, is led by Dr. Zivai, whom, as time goes by, we hope to have it rolled out. Also, it's important that projects look into the capacities of the targeted community. And this is for the sole reason that should we then have evidence-based kind of response or programming, this will only require us to have this kind of data. Second is that we need to promote resilience capacity development, both to the community that we serve as well as to the staff in charge of this project. And this is for the sole reason that resilience is dynamic and keeps changing. And so that means that the capacities that our staff have also need to evolve in the same direction. And more so when we look at monitoring and evaluation, where indicators of resilience are still under development. So what that means is we need to ensure that our staff who are engaged in resilience project or programming have the necessary capacity. And the reason why we also have the community is so that they also are able to understand the whole idea behind the interventions that we are promoting. Moving forward is that we also need to ensure that the programming approaches are gender sensitive, or rather look into the social inclusion and gender differentiated dimensions. And this is more so because disasters will always affect different genders, or rather different genders will always be affected by disasters differently. And by this, I look into both men and women, and also the youth, the girls and boys. They will also, they will always have the effect of resilience felt differently. And so should then our programming be effective, we have to be intentional to this factor that we look into gender analysis, so that we're able to then provide activities or interventions that really matter to the community with whom we ought to increase their resilience. Moving forward is also to ensure programming approach that is climate smart or proved. Here we're looking at how then we can ensure that our development gains are protected. And this, of course, from previous presenters, it's evident that the climate is really changing. And so what does this mean in terms of development? What does this mean in terms of a development project that you have 3 years ago? Is it the same in terms of the existing climate changes in that particular area? And a good example is if we look at the wash facilities, rather areas where probably we've established boreholes and floods come, those boreholes then get rendered useless for that particular time. So what does that mean then? It means then ensuring that these particular activities factor in the climate as well as the risks that exist in that particular area. Last but not the least is to ensure that our resilience programming factor in peace building activities. And this is, of course, to link in with the peace, the triple nexus. A good example of this point is with the current situation in South Sudan, where the rapid conflict then will always put much of ADRA's effort into the drain. And so what this means then is that as we do our programming and designing of our activities, it's important that then we mainstream peace building activities, because at the end of the day, if there is no peace, then even those resilience activities then becomes a bit challenging for us to implement. Moving forward then is, as Michael's really put it into perspective in terms of the climate action plan. And for my case here, I look at the ADRA's resilience agenda, and we are all aware of the ADRA strategic framework, which of course looks into the humanitarian change goal 1 and change goal 2, where resilience as well as disaster risk reduction plays a very critical role in bridging the two. Again, there are quite a number of resources that country offices can take advantage of when it comes to resilience knowledge. And of course, one of them being the ADRA resilience policy that was published not long ago, I guess this year. Adding to the list, we also have the ADRA carbon reduction guide, which I'm sure with the new developments in the carbon accounting, there are going to be also a number of additions to the same resource. And last but not the least, we have the ADRA network environmental and climate change policy. So these three resources provide quite a number of information and way forward in terms of the ADRA resilience agenda, and also some of the best practices that can be adopted by the country office. And of course, this is to add to the list of other resources that Michael just presented to us. Thank you very much for your audience.
Thank you very much, Kelvin, for taking us through this presentation. And with the carbon reduction guide and having Clovis on board, we're looking forward to some exciting tools that is being developed and will be rolled out. So many country offices, if you're interested, please do contact, and we will see how best we can include those offices to test those tools and to pilot carbon accounting. Thank you so much, Kelvin. And now I would like to request Joseph Nju from ICUN. ICUN is International Union for Conservation of Nature. If you can just come up, and I was just looking up the profile of IUCN. IUCN has offices in more than 50 countries, and they run projects all around the world. And they have member organizations and state members in more than 160 countries. And it's a network of over 15,000 voluntary scientists and experts spanning the globe. So Joseph will take us through the best practices of nature-based solutions for sustainable development in Africa for the next 15 minutes. So thank you, Joseph, for accepting the invitation, and we'll hand over this time to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Avish, for this opportunity. I don't know whether I'll be able to navigate through my slides from this hand. Let me see. I'm going to start from the first slide. So thank you very much, ADRA family, for inviting me to this webinar. Very exciting indeed, and feeling honored, of course, for this opportunity. Since the last time we met in Nairobi, somewhere doing some strategic work in terms of project development. So yeah, I feel so much honored, and I'm ready, and I'm happy to share with you some of the best practices that we've been having in terms of nature-based solutions for sustainable development in Africa, but needed to also help you understand what is NBS. So NBS stands for nature-based solution. And as you are aware, IUCN recently has already launched these standards And for some years, there's been a work to do this development, and definition was very critical for this purpose. And what IUCN defines NBS as is actually nature-based actions that are meant to sustainably manage, restore natural modified ecosystems, so as to address some societal challenges, including climate change, food and water security, natural disasters, and through that to effectively manage and adaptively manage these particular issues, even as we want to provide human well-being, such as biodiversity benefits. You know, this is a very important definition for NBS in terms of understanding what are the key elements and what should be done when you talk about the nature-based solutions. And understanding the natural and modified ecosystems, we are talking about 2 to 3% of the heartland, which is ecologically intact across the world. And this is very small, you know, compared to the landmass we have across the globe. And we have in between 20% and 40% of the planet, which is actually areas which are free from the human interference or human disturbances. So again, you can see the extent to which really we need to protect our planet. So understanding this is very critical, so that you understand the magnitude of you know what is expected of us in terms of using the NBS to be able to tackle those challenges that we are talking about. Some of these societal challenges that we are talking about, and they are really well outlined in the NBS standards. We have a whole course, you know, funding this, and also the whole guideline that is out there. And also, I will share some of the materials with you after this webinar for you to do references. We are talking about climate change, disaster risk, economic and social development, water security, food security, human health, and ecosystem degradation. So these are some of these societal challenges that NBS should be able to solve. And you know very well that there could be many definitions of NBS, but in terms of enabling us to tackle some of these challenges, we need to have a very clear definitions of how these things are, and then we understand what is really the criteria for this. And this NBS, sometimes they can be confused with a number of other actions that we've had traditionally. We're talking about some of these things called nature-derived solutions. You've heard about wind power and kind of electricity generation, you know, infrastructure, which is not really nature-based solution. We have had some of the actions called nature-inspired solutions, which are really not nature-based solutions. So definition for IUCN is very critical. And of course, we have other definitions coming from different corners, but for this, this particular definition is critical so that we really know what we are engaged in. The other elements that comes when you talk about nature-based solutions is actually conservation, use and management. We are talking about terrestrial, fresh, all these ecosystems that are across the world, and talking about ecosystem services. So these elements, again, very important. And you can see from this particular figure that we have here in this slide, we have these societal challenges, you know, at the middle, and we have the ecosystem-based approaches that we are using most often, and some of them have been used traditionally and conventionally to address these issues. But I think somehow countries or actors have been doing these things without, you know, critical understanding of what should be done. So really putting this into perspective is critical for us to be able to achieve, you know, important goals. And we have these questions of how, why, and what, and this is why we have the 8 criteria, which I'm going to mention in a few slides, for defining what is nature-based solution. There are 8 criteria, as I said, or what can be coined as NBS principles that are used to determine whether an action, a restoration action, is a NBS or not. One, an NBS should have a conservation aspect. An NBS should also bring the synergetic, issue around that, engaging different actors and different players in the landscapes and in the country. We're talking about having this one at site specific level, so that you are able to do these actions as a site level. But again, NBS number 6, this is something that you can learn more from the literature. I'll share some of these materials with you after this webinar. NBS number 6 tells you it should also come at landscape level, at the landscape scale, so that now you are touching these actions at the site level, and then you're connecting them to the landscape level. It should be transparent and should have broad participation. That one has to be a part of the principle. And then diversity and involvement of all stakeholders, and of course, engaging all policy instruments in the process. And just a very quick glimpse of this particular criteria, the 8 criteria. I can mention a few of them, and giving the details is one of the criteria or the indicator for NBS is, able to resolve or to come up with solutions for certain challenges. And this 1.1 saying, most pressing societal challenges for rights owners and beneficiaries are prioritized. Societal challenges are addressed and clearly understood, and human well-being outcomes arising from NBS are identified, benchmarked, and periodically addressed. So these are some of the what we call self-assessment kind of indicators, sub-indicators that are used to determine whether this is an NBS or not. Yeah, we have number 5, which is inclusive governance, and you have all these subcategories. You can always read for yourself and get to understand, but this is really, these are the questions, or these are the indicators that helps you to determine whether your action is NBS or not. Right? And I think I'm happy because when we were doing some of the work that we were doing in Nairobi in July, we went through some of these things, and we could be able to understand the dynamics of developing an action, a nature-based action. Number 8, sustainability and mainstreaming. An NBS should be able to inform, enhance, and facilitate policy and regulatory dialogue, able to contribute to national and global targets for human well-being. So this is critical for trying to understand whether NBS, whether an action is NBS or not. And NBS also contributes to several SDGs, and I've mentioned a few of them here. We're talking about gender equality, climate action, water and sanitation, poverty, all these ones that you already know. It points to this. It's about sustainability. It's about sustainable development for our countries. Now, the journey of African countries, in use of NBS for sustainable development, and this is something I've seen already, that most of us and most countries have been actually utilizing or have been using NBS without their knowledge. But sometimes a lot of trade-offs comes. You want to understand whether whatever you are doing is sustainable or not. Whatever you're doing, whether it's something that is really addressing the societal challenges and all these criteria. But now I think the conversation about the whole idea of sustainability comes when most of these countries committed to Bond Challenge or African and commitments, which really seeks to restore, which was seeking to restore 100 million hectares of degraded ecosystems. And we have all these countries now committing to restore more than 125 million hectares of land by 2030. So this is where I feel like most of these countries started understanding the magnitude of restoring the degraded ecosystems, and now they need to understand how do we do that? How do we do it sustainably? This also is a map I showed here, showing you some of these countries, how they have started and where they are in terms of this particular process. And we have countries which have already committed. Some of them have done serious assessment. If you go to the NBS standard guideline, you will see something called Rome. Rome has been referenced many times in the NBS, and it's because it helps you assess, the restoration opportunities and potential that a country or a landscape has. And so most of the countries have done this, but they need to know how do they move from these commitments, from these assessments to action on the ground. And this is where it's very important. So this is also giving you some of these details of their commitment. Some of these statistics, maybe they need some updates, but by 2020, we had already 160 million hectares across the globe having been, pledged, and quite a number of these countries have already gone to the extent of doing restoration from assessment and towards the restoration. I gave an example, and before I give you this example of Mozambique, is some of very critical considerations of NBS that comes in when you want to develop any NBS on action. Trying to transition, you want to transition from a degraded ecosystem with all these societal challenges to a more resilient, ecosystem. And we have, the needs that comes in, the opportunities that comes in. For example, from one of the photos that I have here, it shows a landscape that has opportunities for food security, has opportunity for biodiversity, has opportunity for recreation and all that. And on the other side is a photo showing you what are the key strategies that you can use to be able to, achieve these opportunities or achieve these objectives. And this is where now actors and players begin to ask themselves, what is now these strategies? How do these strategies look like? We're talking about some of the restoration packages that you need to develop with NBS specific actions. So whatever you're developing is, responding to the criteria, to the 8 criteria. And just showed you one of the maps here from Mozambique, where Mozambique and some of the priorities of food security, biodiversity, and etc. And we're trying to develop restoration packages for them that could be able to address at landscape level and also site level, where these particular strategies and actions could be applied. Tanzania as well. Tanzania, for their restoration agenda 2021 to 2030, they had, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They had 7 objectives, opportunities or objective for restoration. The agenda was to, restore biological diversity. They wanted to do issues to address climate change issues. They wanted to do to improve water yield. They wanted to improve biofuel potential. They wanted to have food secure country. They wanted to elevate poverty, and they wanted to have what they call gender equity, not actually gender equality. So all these things have to be articulated before you actually develop the NBS, because that is where you start from. So, and these are the kind of the maps that comes in. And then issues of and drivers of degradation. You see in one of the criteria, it requests you, or it wants you to address the drivers of degradation. We are talking about opportunities that comes from this and the degradation that actually is addressed through these particular opportunities. Countries like Rwanda, they have launched just recently, I think it's almost towards the end of 2023 when they are finalizing this. They have started something very, very critical in terms of understanding the NBS. They are calling it catchment restoration opportunity, and they are really doing all this, and they're using NBS. They are using NBS standards to be able to understand whether they are doing proper engagement. They are addressing societal challenges like water, and this has been done through what we are calling Rwanda Integrated Water Resource Management. some of these statistics that you see here comes from really a village kind of level analysis, and also engaging the villages and village leaders in developing some of these actions, along the technical person coming in to provide this capacity at that local level. Kenya, the whole agenda of restoration in Kenya, the restoration of ecosystem, ecosystems in Kenya is about the health of ecosystems and improve livelihoods and enable resource-dependent population. So very important when understanding the NBS that the country needs to understand the opportunities and the objectives of restoration. The whole idea, the agenda for restoration. For Tanzania, again, it's about being able to withstand the crisis and shocks that comes with all those problems, political, whether they are political, economic, or societal issues. For Uganda, it's about being able to cope with the challenging issues of socioeconomic growth and also the long-term sustainability. So again, this is very important for us to understand when developing the NBS, how can we be able to address that particular goal for such a country. Rwanda, I've mentioned about some of the key issues, the key areas they are doing this, and we are talking about agroforestry as the central pillar of Rwanda's FLR, or Restoration Initiative, and they want to transition into a very more robust livelihood. So thank you very much. I had a very short presentation to just give you some appetite for what NBS is and how it's being applied in Africa. I would say that the whole agenda on NBS is really rising, and it's coming up very strongly in this decade. And probably some of countries or some of actors have been using it without their knowledge, but now it's more clear in the standards. You can be able to use it. And ICN is still doing some capacity building for countries, and you can always enroll in one of our academy. It's called ICN Academy, where we have that professional course on NBS. You can do it. And also, I know in the coming days, we'll be able to do physical training while doing project implementation. But again, if you want to understand some of these solutions that we have across the world, you can visit our website called Panorama. It's widely used by many actors to really showcase some of the very best practices that we have across the world. So you are free to go and visit those particular sites and learn more. Thank you very much, and thank you for this opportunity to present to Handra family. Over. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Joseph. I just recall your support, your team support in designing the Global Affairs Canada's funding opportunity. You would be happy to know that the proposal stage was passed, and we are waiting for the official confirmation on that funding. So that programming will be implemented in 4 countries, partnering with IUCN. So that would be Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Kenya, and Ethiopia.
Thank you very much.
Right. Would you like to stop sharing your screen, Joseph? And just would like to let you know that within ADRA, we've been dubbing the word nature-based solutions, and we're looking at faith-based solutions as well. So to address climate action. So
I like that. I'm a faith man, so thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Joseph. And if I think about one person for climate action within ADRA network, we can't ignore Anna Newman, and she's now going to unpack the ADRA network's environment and climate change policy. Thank you, Anna, for taking us through this journey now.
Hi guys, I hope you can hear me well. Yeah, I'm Anna from ADRA Germany, and together with our Resilience Learning Lab, we are working on the issues such as resilience and climate change. You can see my presentation, right? It's working. Okay, perfect. So we have our network environmental and climate change policy. One can say that the climate change is part of the environment, but we wanted to make clear that the topic is very important to us and outline it once more. The policy is created by our regional technical learning lab and is fairly general. As you see, there is a couple of general concepts and some suggestions. It's meant to be general because as ADRA, we represent multiple countries around the globe, multiple countries in Africa, and we expect that each of the offices look at this policy and assess what, as an office, I would like to go in depth. What are my actions and where I put my focus in. So here's a very brief overview of this very brief policy. So the first part is some definitions on adaptive learning management, climate risk, environmental stewardship, which is very important for us and also our church members, how it's all anchored in our beliefs as a church and your personal beliefs, maybe, how it is connected with protecting the creation. Another part looks at the framework supporting this policy, and this is 4 major frameworks. The first one is the Paris Agreement. There is nationally determined contributions. Another one is the Sendai framework for reducing vulnerabilities. Also, a report on human rights with its and environment with its 16 principles. And SDG agenda. For SDG agenda, major SDGs we're looking at is, of course, SDG 13, which is the climate action, but also life above water, life on land, life below water, and one can say SDG 11 with the resilience communities and sustainable cities. We also look at some regional policies. For Africa, for example, this African climate change strategy. But also at all the national documents that are different from country to country. So NDCs, natural determined contribution, national environmental action plans, adaptation plans, and so on and so forth. Some legal environmental impact assessment. And the point is here that each of us should be aware of what kind of policy exists globally, regionally, but also in your country. What is the current national focus? So what is the scope and goal of the whole policy? Is to ensure that ADRA humanitarian and development projects are environmentally friendly. Environmentally friendly, the objectives of it is the 3 main objectives. The first one, restore and protect our ecosystems. So also through the nature-based solution, as our colleague just mentioned, greening our ADRA operations, so greenhouse gas reduction. This is what we are currently doing with Clovis, measuring those emissions with the calculators and also looking on how to reduce them in our offices through our projects and to make us climate neutral. And the last one is improve the resilience of communities and ecosystems through approaches like nature-based solutions, One Health, regenerative agriculture. We expect that through these approaches and through these priorities, we do not harm, we don't contribute to any foreseeable negative impact, and also that we protect nature and ecosystems around us. Despite ADRA being a human-centered and society-centered NGO, we see the great connection between the well-being of people and well-being of ecosystem in which people live in. So yeah, here it is once more, but in a graphic, in a more user-friendly way. You can see here restore and protect ecosystem, nature-based solution, ecosystem-based adaptation. Nature-based solution is, of course, a great topic, incorporating eco-based adaptation, eco-based mitigation, engineering, ecological engineering, and some other aspects. It's a huge overarching topics with which we just start to deal and understand it as frame. And another part is the reduction of our emissions through our carbon neutral strategy, renewable energy, waste management, disaster risk management, our corporate accountability as ADRA and as an organization for all of our social businesses. Another part is the improving resilience of our communities through all our projects in 3 areas: food security, livelihood situation, health, also disaster risk reduction. Through all these different approaches that I mentioned, ADRA as an organization has a multitude of approaches in this direction, as I mentioned. So we have regenerative agriculture, conservation agriculture, permaculture, circular economy. It's quite diverse, but we're looking for this to aim at the same goal. Coming to the practical solutions, there are just a few, and I will name it, but each of them is a topic in itself and would require some time to unpack it. Unfortunately, we don't have time now. So we have a green procurement practices because we as a ADRA also responsible for the products we buy and distribute, and to some extent we should be able to analyze the life cycle of the products that we procure and distribute to people, and decide for the more sustainable alternatives, sustainable waste management, recycling, circular economy where it is possible, making sure that from production to disposal, the items live the longest life as it is possible, and when it is possible, they go in a circle, so the recycled items are brought back again in use, and upcycling or downcycling. Efficient use of resources of water and energy, so also energy efficiency, analyzing the energy that is needed for our offices, for our projects, and the same is for water. Greenhouse gas reduction through measurement and offsetting, first in our offices and then in a project, because we also as an organization and as an entity needs to practice what we preach in a sense before we bring it to the communities and to bring it outside. For example, we as ADRA Germany are on this journey, and this is just the beginning for us. Also investing in women and girls because they're very vulnerable to the climate change specifically, and gender and climate as a topics are very connected. And adhere to national and international environmental regulation, and also influencing those regulations. So working with the donors, working with our governments on environmental and climate change policies. Some other commitments, we would like to review this policy every 2 years. So we want for this to be a living document that is, that could be informed by the experiences that we do, by our achievements, by the approaches that we use. Advocate for climate justice. So we don't see ADRA as only organization who do hands-on work with the community, but also as an organization could bring its voices on the national platform and regionally, talking about the topics such as climate change and sustainability. Integrating climate mitigation and adaptation equally in all of our projects, because we see importance of both. Embracing leadership of local actors and embracing our own corporate accountability as ADRA and individual as a people who work in the organization. As already mentioned, circular economy approach, doing the basic analysis on the items that we produce, on the toxicity, on the production life of the product, looking at the repair, upcycling, downcycling possibilities. We also would like to see, when we work with the offices, what kind of policies that office has. So practically it would mean that, for example, ADRA Germany would be, if they work, let's say this ADRA Mozambique, would like to exchange policies and see where we can support each other. This is a not top-down approach, but rather exchange of the knowledge and exchange of the standards that we have to make sure that we are implementing on some certain standard together. We would like in the future to have environmental clause in our contracts for the project implementation, so it's enforced to some extent. Work collaboratively between humanitarian and development sector, not creating silos, and making sure climate change and environment are mainstreamed from the emergency to the development action. And work on the targets and measures, basically indicators to measure our progress to make it smart. Okay, some of our other principles. Do no harm, life cycle thinking, so life cycle analysis, environmental impact assessment, precautionary approach, meaning that before we implement, we assess and we see not to create additional damage. Participatory and inclusive approach for the women, people with disabilities, communities, different actors, also private sector and the government. Treating mitigation and adaptation as equal, and adaptive management, meaning if we work on something, but we see that it doesn't bring some particular result in increasing biodiversity or decreasing emissions, we are agile enough to change and to try something else. Some practical guidelines. We suggest environmental assessment of the different depths in all of our projects, except of maybe just very acute emergencies. We understand that not all projects can undergo very in-depth environmental assessment, because some of them may be emergency projects and some of them maybe do not have some in-depth environmental component. but we will introduce 3 levels of assessment. So from the light assessment with just about few questions for the emergency projects to the in-depth assessments for the development projects, where especially those projects which are changing the ecosystems and heavily impacting the nature, using nature-based solution and so on. So there is a analysis of the initial situation, there is analysis of the activities suggested by the project and potential adjustments of those activities based on the analysis. Yeah, sustainable energy solutions, circular economy, and reducing waste and pollution by changing how we see it. Circulating products and materials, improving our soil, which is our soil is very much responsible for the carbon bonding and also carbon emission if not handled properly. And integrating emission offset in our projects, not necessary by only buying the credits, but also by our own activities, or maybe by some national reforestation activity. For example, recently, ADRA Netherlands planted 1,000 trees to offset emissions of their own office. This was not connected to a specific project. It was just their own activity to equalize the environmental footprint as an office. So there could be a multitude of examples here. Some other examples, having a gender and climate sensitive approaches and promoting nature-based solutions, which again are very broad topic with a lot of areas to cover. We are focused on sustainable regenerative agriculture and food systems because a lot of our projects as ADRA are directed to agriculture and livelihoods, conservation, restoration and rehabilitation of forest and terrestrial ecosystems, and freshwater resources of all our coastal initiatives. Other things are giving training to our staff on the environmental sustainability to making sure that we live it as an organization and as a single employees working there, reducing our emissions, using green procurement practices, and measuring energy efficiency. Some other things that we already started practicing in some of the offices, making sure that our national commute, for example, commutes that is about 30 minutes to 2 hours are not through the air travel. So basically it could be buses, it could be trains, it could be even cars with multiple people, but not just with one single person. So somehow making it emission low, having a digital meetings like this one, for example. Yeah, and providing our staff emission low commute opportunities. So be it by bicycle, maybe by train, by bus. Somehow, some offices they substitute for the tickets, for the national tickets by train or by bus to come to the office. It could be different opportunities depending on the national circumstances. And promote staff awareness, such as tree planting, cleanups, digital discussions. Yeah, and there are different environmental days like water days, ecosystem days, and we all doesn't have to do the same, but we all should look at it and see where our own office can contribute, where we can focus as an organization. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Anna. I know unpacking the policy in 10 minutes is a marathon race, but as we all have agreed that this is just a teaser to the full movie which is coming, and we will break down components of this policy, and we will have separate webinars to delve deep and have more brainstorming sessions on it to make it applicable or to look at actions which will come out of those policies. So at this time, we have another very important guest speaker with us. His name is Adis Tesfa. Adis, if you can come up. Okay, we can see you already there. So Adis Tesfa is working with International Council for Voluntary Agencies, which is also called as ICVA, and he's a representative for East and Southern Africa. So he was recommended by his colleagues from Geneva, and we are so happy, Adis, that you could give 5 minutes of your time to share with us the Climate and Environment Charter for Humanitarian Organizations. And I know there could be many more ADRA offices in Africa who might be interested to join the band as it is. And now we have few officers who have signed up to the charter. Thank you, Addis.
Thank you, Avish. Just to check, can you hear me? Is the voice? Okay, great. Apologies, internet can be sometimes tricky here. It's a real pleasure to be here today with you all and you know, to engage with you. From what I heard briefly earlier, ADRA is quite advanced in terms of policy. So maybe some of what I will say today is not going to be groundbreaking for you all. So IGBA is a network of humanitarian organizations, as Avish just stated, and our global footprint or membership is around 160 individual organizations. We have obviously quite a few big organizations such as yourselves as part of the members. Quite recently, we started working with IFRC and ICRC on the Climate and Environmental Charter for Humanitarian Organizations. The ambition of the charter is to promote transformational change across humanitarian sector to improve our practice. It's a simple and accessible document, and it's available to all humanitarian organizations for adoption, just like the Code of Conduct in '94. So it's mostly a self-accessible kind of document. In terms of how it was crafted, the consultations, there was a consultative process, and there was a consultations with, there were 20 plus consultations and presentations of the charter, with an online form as well, available in English, French, Arabic, and Spanish, with over 200 individuals representing 150 plus organizations present. In terms of the breakdown of this number, we had national NGOs and INGO local regional chapters, which were 57. We had INGOs, which were numbered around the tune of 29-30. We had Red Cross, Red Crescent, national societies in the mix, humanitarian networks, so NGO forums at country level, UN agencies, think tanks, and others. To this day, we have actually 328 signatories and 11 supporters of the charter. These 11 supporters are, amongst them are Switzerland, the US, United States of America, Norway, Denmark, Germany, the EU, Sweden, Spain, France, Canada, and the UK. The charter can be, has 7 big commitments. And these can be grouped into 3 big sectors: the what, the how, and the accountability piece. The first one is on the how, the first and second one. And these are to step up. The first commitment is to step up our response to growing humanitarian needs and help people adapt to the impact of climate and environmental crisis. So this is more of an adaptation piece where signatories step up the response, focus on climate change adaptation, disaster risk reduction, and anticipatory action, but also around preparedness, response, and recovery, and finally supporting those most at risk. The second one is to maximize the environmental sustainability of our work and rapidly reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. So a rather external viewing mitigation aspect to the policy. This includes adapting or integrating into our own organizations and environmental policies, having a longer term environmental impact vision of our programs, reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, offsetting our emissions, which I heard earlier as well, and managing resources to reduce waste. Now, on the how, which is the most difficult part. These are basically 4 big blocks in the commitments. The first one in this part is to embrace local leadership, and local actors and communities, which is mostly around the localization agenda. And it's to have a community level analysis of risks and engaging with structural aspects of engagement to participation. The second one here is to increase our capacity to understand climate and environmental risks and develop evidence-based solutions. This is around the knowledge generation aspect of the climate charter, and it's to produce and share relevant and accessible data and analysis to help address data scarcity, but also sharing the data that is generated across the sector to bridge disparities in data access. The third one is to work collaboratively across the humanitarian, development, and environmental sector and beyond to strengthen climate action. This is obviously a collaborative or comparative or comprehensive aspect, in which complementarity is essential, and we need to be complementing each other, share info, maximize capacities of different organizations, and breaking down the silos, as the previous speaker noted. And we need to work with actors beyond the humanitarian sector to achieve this. The fourth one is to use our influence to mobilize urgent and more ambitious climate action and environmental protection. This is basically an advocacy piece or an influencing piece where we need to channel our resources and attention towards, influencing legal and policy frameworks towards the more vulnerable and at-risk people, and to advocate for more ambitious climate action and environmental protection. Finally, I will, sorry to be a bit long, I will finish on the accountability part, which is the seventh biggest commitment. And it's around developing and improving targets and standards as we implement our commitments. Basically, signatories are free to use their own indicators and set their own targets, and they vary on the capacity and mandate of each organization. So we're not going to ask for a small CSO to have the same type of policy as, let's say, a multi-billion-dollar annual budget or NGO. Signatories are encouraged to develop and share their targets within 1 year from their signature. So this is the accountability part. Targets should be informed by international standard and agreement. One such standard or agreement would be the Paris Agreement. And obviously they should be evidence-based. So we would encourage people or organizations to follow the latest scientific evidence. The targets could be, may represent intermediate steps or long-term goals, depending on the ambition of each of the organizations. There is no formal external monitoring mechanism to this charter, and organizations themselves are expected to monitor and report on their own progress. And this is a way of all of us moving forward, actually, in achieving this climate and environment charter commitments. I hope I wasn't too long, Avish. I will end there.
Thank you very much, Addis. And we look forward to your presence when we have more in-depth discussions. But for now, I believe your presence from ICWA was important as well. So thanks for motivating and giving us some brief insights on ICWA's strategy. Thank you very much, Addis.
Thank you.
And
thank you, Avish.
Let's keep in touch. And your presence for East and Southern Africa is key. And I believe Zivai and Hannah, who are the face for ADRA Africa, will be in touch with you as well at some point. So thank you so much, Addis.
Please do. It would be a pleasure. Thank you all for listening to me.
Okay. Thank you. So now it's time for Zivai. Please take away with the group discussion.
Thanks a lot, Avish. So we've listened to a lot of different things, and I'm sure some of you, your minds were running around like, okay, what does this really mean in terms of what we do on a day-to-day basis? And so I just want us to take a few minutes, 15 minutes or so, to just look at a couple of things and to try and explore what we have been doing. I think the issue of climate action is far less intimidating than the different theories and policies that you've been listening to, because these are some of the things that you've been doing practically on the ground, because any other way would not have worked. So I just want you to know that from going around the continent, you've been doing a lot of amazing work. But I think as we were coming up with a capacity statement, some of you were not placing those things as climate action, but you were actually saying, okay, this is common sense because this will work here and this will not work here. So I just want us to have a bit of a discussion. But as we get into the discussion, I was trying to sort of ground us in what Africa is thinking about. When I talk about Africa, in this case, I'm just looking at the African Union 2022 to 2023 climate agenda, and they're looking at a vision, a sustainable, prosperous, equitable, and climate resilient Africa. So our discussion is actually not out of line. And the nice thing about this is their agenda started running this year, so we are not behind either. I think we should be very pleased with ourselves that this is the time when we are really talking seriously about what we are going to do. And the objective is to build the resilience of African communities, ecosystems, and economies, and supporting regional adaptation. And I think it's also not far away from some of the things we've been talking about in terms of nature-based solutions, in terms of the policies that we have. So I just wanted you to be aware and to encourage all of you to look at this strategy so that you can be grounded. So I have a couple of questions that I want us to speak to, and all of us are encouraged to participate and share. So it's not going to be limited to just a few people sharing. The first question I want us to look at is, maybe before we even talk about that first question, as ADRA, if you look at our current strategic framework, change goal 1, change goal 2, we single out education, health, and agriculture, livelihoods as the key pillars of our interventions, and then emergency management. So I want you to think of any of these sectors, depending on your area of specialty or area of interest. And as you respond, you really specify what you're talking about. For example, how is climate change and environmental issues impacting any of these sectors in which you are already responding? So how is it impacting? And Kelvin actually highlighted some issues from South Sudan. So we'd love to hear from you. So please just raise your hand so that we can hear from you. How is it impacting? And as you share on that, tell us which population groups are most affected and in what way. Please raise your hand so that I can't see your hands right now. I'm trying to work with my device. So to encourage you to speak, if your hand is not up, I might ask you to actually share. Maybe because I know you have some good information from your region. So yes, Kennedy. In fact, I was going to ask you to share. So you've done well to raise your own hand. Go ahead, Kennedy.
All right, thank you. Let me see if I can get to, okay, thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation so far. Climate change effects are a reality in Zambia, and we have been seeing it where the communities where we work, especially in the lower Zambezi Valley, that's where a number of some of our interventions are. And the challenge is seen in that perennially we have to get to these people and provide some assistance, either through government or other means. For instance, this year alone, they had a challenge of, first of all, the rains delayed to come. And then when it came, it was so much, it flooded. And after the flood, again, went to some drought. And so whatever people managed to grow, actually, then that also got destroyed. And so this has been the situation. And because of that, we've seen now even the communities have to survive. And the only livelihoods they think of is charcoal burning. And so they keep on cutting trees, exacerbating the situation, because if they cut trees, then they have to make charcoal. And then this charcoal, of course, ends up in the urban setup because of the problems with the water situation. Most of our electricity is coming from the hydro power stations. And then these power stations don't have enough water. And as we speak now, we've just received a load shedding or power management schedule, which will run on until somewhere maybe May next year. And that what means, it means all of us will need to use charcoal. And this charcoal is coming to some of these already stressed situations. So it's more like a vicious cycle. And these people are cutting trees for livelihoods, of course, but they are feeding us in the city who need energy security, so to say. But again, it means most of these lands are getting degraded. And some of you who may have been here will see that these places are really so degraded in terms of the soils and the trees. You know, the deforestation is real. And I think Zambia is one of the 4 countries which are losing forests at the highest rate in the world. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Ken. Vicente?
Thank you, Dr. Svai, and good afternoon, everyone.
Maybe for the benefit of those who don't know you, you just mentioned the country you're from. So Kennedy is from Zambia, Vicente is Mozambique. Okay, we proceed.
Thank you. This meeting, I think, was critical to be able to learning all the presentations here. Responding to your question in terms of impact in Mozambique, you have seen that there is increase of extreme event, not only on frequency but intensity, and one that is more visible is the frequent cyclones that are taking place, particularly in the coastal region, and the impact is being huge. At the same time, you can see the impacts on particular by floods and also droughts. And the immediate consequence is that this is affecting livelihood of community, particular smallholder farm, and food insecurity. We have been seeing the IPC levels are always higher during this period, the cyclone season period. And as consequence, also there is a growing pressure of those communities on ecosystem service, particularly the higher dependence on natural resources and so on. One of the things that we are having debate internal will be for us to be able to determine the impact of those events in the areas where we operate in terms of biodiversity loss. For instance, what impact is happening in terms of soil biodiversity, water availability, and so on. We would like to be able to determine those kind of impacts and be able to inform our interventions in terms of what we can do when we design our nature-based solution to tailor to those specific problems. I think in terms of general impact is that we had a discussion in terms of direct impact of those events on ecosystems, but to realize rather that have a big impact of those events on a particular ecosystem is more the pressure that is coming from human beings, less than necessary the environmental in terms of destruction of those ecosystems. I think I'll stop by here, Dr. Svai. Over to you.
Yeah. Maybe Vicente, for Kennedy, I could almost ever feel that it's actually affecting, whole populations. In Mozambique, is it the same? Are women affected more than youths? Are youths affected more than adults? What is the story?
When you look to the agriculture and livelihood side, women are the majority affected because men look at the economy, the growing economy. There's a transition where males are more focused not only in agriculture but also pit jobs and also immigration. So women are left with the burden and they are the ones suffer more. The same thing is young happen with the young girls because the male boy follow the same pattern of his parents. So we can see those distinctions. And also the dependence on ecosystem services more for women's, where they're going to collect the hoods and other fruits on the forest when there's anger and so on.
Thank you so much. So we can already see a gender bias towards the impacts there. Yes, Edwin. Edwin is from Zimbabwe. Edwin, please go ahead.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, like in Zimbabwe, we are also working with farmers who are into horticulture farming. And horticulture is one of the area which maybe let me say which has been neglected because mostly they are self-sufficient and they can actually, those farmers can actually access resources. But recently these farmers are being affected by climate change, and it's now a reality to most of farmers whom we are working with, mainly in the area of water systems, because most of those farmers, they use a lot of water, because horticulture is all year round, and those farmers were depending with some perennial streams, and some of them were actually harvesting bores. So the challenge which the farmers are facing now is those streams which used to be perennial are no longer perennial. And also the bores, they used to go maybe around 60 meters, but for now, for them to have sufficient water, they may need to go depth above 120 meters. So there is a serious problem in terms of water availability for horticulture because of climate-related, which is now seeing less and less rain for each and every year. So in terms of the continuous discussion which we are doing with farmers, actually we are now tackling these horticulture farmers to understand the issues of managing their ecosystem as a whole. And to start with, we are now doing some trainings around watershed management and water harvesting, so that at least they can make sure that their streams are recharged, and also they can also make sure that they are also increasing the amount of water, the amount of underground water. And also, as we are also working with these farmers, we also realized that some of them were also not doing like some, water saving in field. Right now, I think most of them, they are now going the drip irrigation way as a way of conserving the water resources. And also they're now doing in-field water harvesting. So I think this was what I can say for now. And in terms of maybe like the targeting, like women, youth, we observed that basically women are most affected because those are the ones who normally works in the field. So they are the ones who are highly affected. And also what other groups are very youthful groups who are also in horticulture, who are also doing better, they are also affected. So I think for now I can end here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Edwin. Claudio and Janet, I see you. I want to pick up on the second question, and so prepare to respond to that so that we can get a move on. I would love to hear, I think the responses have come from Southern Africa. I would love to hear from East Africa, from West Africa. I think we have Mauritania and Ghana represented here. So what are some of the climate change adaptive interventions within the sector? I know that just now Edwin has talked about, drip irrigation, water harvesting technologies within the fields. What other climate change adaptive interventions are we engaged in, or are we starting to see even maybe amongst our different partners? Janet, do you want to go on to have a go at it? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I think some of the measures include the use of, or the increased use of, or promotion of drought-tolerant varieties, which are best suited for the prevailing climatic conditions. And overall, what we have also seen is the government promoting conservation agriculture practice, like in Zimbabwe. What was commonly being promoted by the government was they call it a Fumvudza concept, which is more or less like a conservation promoting conservation agriculture right around the country, but for the production of the grains, but with a major thrust on the use of the small grains. And then the other thing is to promote the, I think as Edwin has said, the use of drip irrigation, but solar powered irrigation schemes has been a common trend. I think when when Kennedy was discussing, he discussed the challenges with electricity and how I think Zimbabwe, Zambia, they share the common hydro powered electrical services, which are becoming more of a challenge because of the water shortages. So there's been more the promotion of solar power, because in Southern Africa by nature we have, I think we because of the positioning, we have a lot of solar that can actually be tapped into, and can, if more investments are done in solar farms, this can actually be a good adaptive measure rather than just relying on hydro-powered systems.
Okay, thanks, Janet. Zeriyun, can I put you on the spot? If you can talk a bit about how you are doing rangeland reclamation, I think that would be a very interesting sharing from Ethiopia. Zeriyun?
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, a lot is happening, like what's taking place in most part of Africa. Yes, by the virtue of being present in the very dry areas such as Afar and Somali, our main focus target is pastoralist and agro-pastoralist. And there has been degraded land. We still have projects named as building resilience in Horn of Africa, and a lot of rangeland intervention has been going on. We have seen that being really productive. Mainly, like the food security and the water resources are really affected. And even in ADRA, we are promoting in Ethiopia as a solar campus. Actually, ADRA Ethiopia is at the national level has impacted the curriculum on training solar technicians, and at the moment there are graduates we are sending those graduates to different parts so that they can really promote the solar campus. Actually, I can say except Tigray region, all over the country. And we have also engaged in changing some of the diesel pumps into solar pumps. It has been going on. And the other, like in terms of tree planting, maybe you have heard Ethiopia is one of the countries which are planting many millions of trees within. So we are actively engaged on that one as well. So a lot is happening. Yes, rangeland degradation has been a very common problem in Afar and Somali, and with enclosure, a lot of change has been seen. Maybe I better stop here. Otherwise, there is a lot that can be reported. I better pause here for the sake of time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I know that in different discussions and platforms, the issue of climate change action, adaptation in Africa, they have highlighted that it really has to touch on issues of livelihood, and I think that is actually coming through. Can I just hear a few thoughts about what the role of women and youths in these adaptive interventions? Do you think they have a unique place which is different, let's say, from men, for example? And the reason why I'm actually raising this question is because if you also check in the Africa agenda, they will tell you that to sort out the issues of food security, we must focus on women and youth. And yet you are all highlighting that the impact of climate change is really affecting food security or food production. So what exactly is their role or anticipated role? Claudio, you had your hand up earlier. Alexandre Fumo, Alexandre. Go ahead.
Yes, hello, thank you. Well, what we see here in Mozambique is what we've mentioned before, is that usually women are the ones mostly associated with agriculture and livelihoods attached to the household and their farms. So the people who would be best adapted to, or best positioned in order to integrate various good practices such as agroforestry and conservation agriculture, these would be women, because they are, at least in Mozambique, the vast majority of smallholder farmers. And so they are most positioned for that. Youth, for example, in Mozambique have a large force or group of individuals who have been recently educated. They have an interest in their future and in the availability of resources, and they have a drive in order to achieve it. And so the youth in Mozambique are very much being pushed into entrepreneurship, into innovation for new solutions. And with NBS, nature-based solutions, the youth are the ones who are able to integrate them from the onset. We can be able to actually plan our businesses, plan our employment in such a way that we do not have to adapt or shift the direction of our work. We can start from the grassroots up. These are certain things that we could consider. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I want to throw in another question. Please indulge me for a few more minutes. I know our time is fast running out. I can't believe it. When we have emergency responses, in what ways are we making sure that our emergency responses are sensitive and adapting to climate change, or at least not contributing to further deterioration of the environment, as you have highlighted? Is the question clear or complicated? Basila, where are you? I'm seeing some of you here. Okay. I think she has gone off.
Yeah, I'm sorry, could you please rephrase the
question? So I'm saying in most of the country offices here, you respond to emergencies, even in Mozambique with the flooding and all that. How are you making sure that your emergency interventions do not cause further harm or even contribute towards the recovery phase, where we will start to really build on resilience as we go back into development?
Right. This is what we have on the impact assessment. There's usually, before every project is done, we actually have to follow Mozambican legislation that also requires environmental impact assessment, but we also do that because of compliance with various donors and partners. So there's an environmental and a social assessment. And we always evaluate the positive and negative impacts, not just to nature, but also to people's livelihoods. And we assess any risk factors, such as if there's a cyclone, a drought, a flood, and how this would impact the project implementation. And so we can already have some mitigations or some compensations or something of the sort.
Okay, thank you so much. Benon, what do you think we can do in the refugee context so that we do not impact the environment negatively? Yes, please go ahead. Benon, you are unmuted, but you can't be heard. I think something is wrong with your system. Okay, Romuald, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. In Rwanda, instead of, for instance, using the the firewoods or the charcoal cutting trees, we are using now the cooking gas, whereby all refugees they have the cooking stoves, and that reduces the cutting of trees and the use of those firewoods. Another point is we are also promoting the kitchen garden using the techniques, the permaculture techniques, whereby they collect even those garbages from their kitchens and their houses, and then they put in the garden, and they help them to produce vegetables and also to reduce the garbage and to improve the environment, which is really safe for to prevent some diseases that may be caused by unhygienic behaviors. Okay. Another point is here in Rwanda also we train women for the saving in the saving groups, so that when for instance, when there is a kind of drought or there is a shortage of food, they can somehow do some small businesses that can help them to earn some money and to generate some income and buy some food. Okay. These are some of the interventions we do, the activities we do to mitigate the impact of climate change. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you so much. I think we could go on and on in this discussion. As Avisha has consistently said during this webinar, this was just to whet our appetites, and also I think this discussion session is to give us some confidence that there are things that we are already doing and we just need to package them. So when we think about youth, the youths are very flexible and adaptable, and so we have more chances of probably educating them, bringing them on board, and having them as champions. It's a thought that's being shared also by another participant, and I think there's a lot of relevance there, and these are things that we would want to explore. So in summary, I think what is actually clear is that livelihoods are really impacted, especially the food security, the agriculture production, and there is also the side of power. And so what we really need is to have good system-wide assessments of our resilience capitals as we start, so that whether it's emergency or it's a development initiative, so that we make sure that we are programming well to protect our environment. And we really need to also look at ensuring that we start to recharge the underground aquifers, so that those who already have livelihoods which are agro-based can continue to be productive. And then, of course, exploring drought-tolerant varieties, even short-season varieties, solar pumping, solar technologies, rangeland reclamation. And women have the advantage of being positioned, and the youths can engage in the space of innovation and coming up with new solutions, because they can actually get very excited about this. So as I close off this session, I just want to highlight a few points from the strategy that also has been shared, that we really need to have from the African Union, we need a people-centered approach. So they said their guiding principles are a people-centered approach, conserving and restoring our natural capitals. So that's critical, aligning plans and priorities and leaving no one behind. We need a just transition. We need evidence and practice. So we need to talk a lot more about generating evidence as we do our work. an African-led and African-owned intervention. So we really need to be on the forefront of what's happening, and then a whole of economy approach. And I think you can actually clearly see from what we are talking about, and intersectionality. It cannot be one sector specific, but we need to be wider. And then we need to have a common but differentiated approach depending depending on what is actually happening. Michael, if you would like to comment, Michael Imujaro, can you just please type your comment? We are now just managing our time, really. It's not that you are supposed to leave without making a comment, as you have put it. Could you just type in your comment and we read it as we close, because we are now like 15 minutes over time. So that's what I'm just grappling with. We would have loved to continue talking, but this is just a beginning of these discussions, and hopefully we will be able to engage once again and to be able to discuss some more and look at solutions. So in the next interactions in these regions, we will take it bite-sized so that we can also have measurable outcomes and action points that we take back. So back to you, Avish. Michael, please go ahead and type your comment in the comment section, and Avish will read it out. Thank you.
Thank you, Zivai, for that wonderful facilitation. I could see a lot of interest and great suggestions coming from various regions that we are working with. And I believe you rightly mentioned, the time is not enough, and definitely we will have subsequent webinars on specific topics. For instance, how is climate change affecting the education sector? I know in the COP27, education was not highlighted, but in COP28, which will be held in Dubai, they have committed already, saying that we want to bring education in forefront when it comes to climate change, because the future belongs to the young peoples. If we don't get them up to speed, they will not take the ownership. Likewise, the health sector and the climate change was also pushed by the FCDO. So perhaps even us as an entities within the Africa ADRA entities, we need to start looking of how our health sector is being affected. So we can take a look at these sector-wise climate change impacts and solutions and barriers, and we can continue with that. So with that, I think I will hand it back to Hannah to give a closing remarks and wish us all with a final prayer. Thank you, Hannah. Oh, by the way, Hannah had a topic to share with us. Given the time limitation, we had to agree and move it to the next webinar when we have it together. So thank you, Hannah, for accommodating that change.
Thank you so much, Avish. It was indeed a very rich forum. We have had several, topics covered, and we really appreciate every one of you who presented. Indeed, it is clear that Africa ecosystem is degraded, and we need to move forward with actions to ensure that we bring some safetiness in it. Maybe the next one we'll be talking about also the issue of humanitarian in this climate change. And I do know that, as we have mentioned, there'll be various segments on that. But just to cap it off, I just want also to mention that Sphere Standard, they have developed a nature-based solution guide, which we'll be looking at, and also IUCN, the way they have mentioned, it's a way to go. We will need to consult with them and see how do we come up with how do we get ADRA staff be trained on this topic so that we can enrich the activities that we are doing. With all this, I want to say thank you to every one of you. You've taken time to join us. We really appreciate, and I do know that we have a long way to go as we continue learning and contributing. As we have mentioned, it is a learning. We need to have these kind of forums to ensure that we share our experiences. So come 2023 is going to be a very vibrant year for us to be quite positioned to what we are doing. Thank you very much. and all the best. I just want to close with a word of prayer. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for leading us in these sessions. Thank you for all the presentation. Thank you for those who participated. And thank you even for the journey that we have begun. Continue to lead us so that we can have a good climate around us. Be with us now, for we pray this in your name. Amen. All the best. Bye.
Amen.
Amen.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Appreciate.